It's California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance, and we are joined today by Mark Stone. He is a member of the California State Assembly, representing the beautiful Monterey Bay. Tough life you got. We're in Sacramento,
That's tough,
of course,
yes.
today. I want to speak with you about some of the challenges that face some of our citizens here in California, our residents. The rich-poor gap is growing and growing dramatically, not just in California, but throughout the nation. But we know in California it's growing even wider.
That's right.
What can you tell us about that? What do you know?
Well, and recognize that poverty rates in California are almost 25%. It's a little bit under 24% using the supplemental measure. And the traditional federal poverty measure only addresses the cost of food. If you look at housing, transportation, childcare, education, all of the costs that go into being a Californian, we have the highest poverty rate. And we have especially the highest poverty rate with respect to kids.
We're California. We're not supposed to have high poverty rates. We have beautiful coasts and beautiful mountains and beautiful deserts, and you know but you know what I'm getting at.
But we do.
I think there's a real disconnect.
Struggle here, right? And with the downturn in the economy, more people have entered into poverty, and nobody right now is getting out of poverty.
Why is that? Because look, you know that we've turned the corner on the recession, and our job growth. Well, help me.
Yes and no.
Yeah.
We've turned the corner on the recession. And most of the gains since the recession ended, if we're in this recovery, most of the gains have been limited to the very top echelons of wage earners in California. If you're middle class, lower middle class, and working poor, you're at best staying stable. At worst, through most people are losing ground in their buying power or in their wages.
So you have a proposal that looks to address the question of the rich-poor gap. Talk to us first about what we know as the federal earned income tax credit before we talk about your proposal.
It's a tax credit that if you're on the low end of the wage scales, you can apply for. And that gives you then, like any other tax credit where we do this every year, throw different pots of money and give tax benefits to industries or individuals or kind of across the board. This is a tax credit for the lowest wage earners in the nation, and in this case California, what I'm proposing, so that they would be able to reduce their tax burden, putting more money in their pockets.
And I've spoken with many members of the Board of Equalization throughout the years, and they are consistently talking about the federal EITC and how so often it's left on the table.
It is. We don't have a significant take-up rate. We need to address that as well, because those are federal dollars that would be put into California in the way of money not being then sent off to the federal government through taxes.
And so through the federal earned income tax credit, is that refundable? Is that cash in hand?
Yes, it's refundable.
And so I believe billions of dollars flow through California as a result of the federal earned income tax credit. But you're looking, sir, at creating a state earned income tax credit. Why don't you tell us about your proposal?
Yeah, there are 25 other states currently that have their own version of their own augmentation to the tax credit. And California, since we have our unique brand of poverty and a unique challenges for living in California.
And unique tax structure.
But our cost of living is high. It's difficult always. And with the recovery going on in certain segments of California, but not others, we have multiple problems. And one is getting people out of poverty. For that 24% who's living in poverty, a full 80+% or more will never make enough money to get out of poverty. Meaning they're constantly on those rolls, bringing with it the challenges that represents. And so for California to take responsibility to that population, I think we need to put some money into it, invest in those families, give them a tax break that then puts money in their pocket. The other benefit of it is that once people have money in their pockets, and in the poorer communities, they don't have the luxury of saving, of banking, of even necessarily investing it. They will tend to spend that money. There's nothing that drives an economy faster than people living in an area spending their money.
And the key is this is not a deduction like a mortgage deduction.
Correct.
This is cash in hand.
It reduces it reduces their tax liability.
Okay.
So like any tax break, they were not paying into the tax system, but through their payroll deduction taxes, as they are paying along throughout the year, once you calculate in the tax credit, then that will, in fact, augment the refund that you get back. So you could adjust your W-2 and then really get no refund back. And that's a pretty complex calculation that not everybody does very well. So a lot of folks get refunds. this would increase that refund, and that's why it's key that it's refundable, because that puts money in the pocket of the people then who apply for it.
So where do you go from here? The bill has been dropped, I understand. It's AB 43.
AB 43.
And I understand it needs a majority vote, not a 2/3 vote.
Well, yes, because from a policy standpoint, and I think it's very hard to argue with the policy of that investment, it's really a budget question at this point.
I see.
And even if I can get the policy through, once it hits the Appropriations Committee, they're going to ask, well, how are you going to fund it?
How are you going to fund it?
And it's going to be a big number. So what I'm pushing for is to make it a budgetary priority of the Democratic caucus, so that as we put our budget together to negotiate with the governor and with the Senate, as we do every year, that an earned income tax credit is on the table and that we fund it to some extent.
What does that look like? I mean, do you know the number, the cost of it, or it really depends on how much the final figure is?
If I get everything that I asked for, I mean, it could easily be between $1 billion and $2 billion.
Which, look, that's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money.
In the scheme of things, it's not even 1% of the budget.
No, if you understand the cost of poverty to all taxpayers, to all Californians, because poverty drives incarceration rates, poverty drives the education gap, poverty drives so much of what we're trying to address, and the poor don't have the services. The federal EITC, where people are taking advantage of it, all the studies show that it does lift people out of poverty. It helps educational outcomes because those families have more access. They have a little bit more money to play with. You're taking pressures out of that family. Taking those pressures off, we can reduce child abuse rates. We can reduce spousal abuse rates. We can start to have healthier families as they move through the system. And when kids live in a healthier environment, they learn better, and if they get better educational outcomes, they then have higher earning power once they get into the workforce.
I'm sure you're aware that newly minted Senator Bob Hertzberg is looking at tax reform in a very grand way.
Right.
And I'm wondering, and forgive me, I'm just a guy who watches and enjoys politics. Could it be that this is something you speak with him about as part of a package? Because look, he's gonna push, and so if this can be part of his grand plan, maybe he gets even more legs.
Potentially, the fact that he has introduced it, and I believe in EITC is part of his.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Yeah, what he's seeing, but the controversy is the tax reform.
Yes.
I didn't want to tie it to any particular revenue source so that we can focus on EITC as a policy mechanism, look at it for its benefits as opposed to getting tied up in any particular revenue source.
Let's assume that some form of EITC passes in California. How does your bill include language that provides for, I'll just call it marketing? Because in the end, I am just always amazed when members of the Board of Equalization come here pleading with people to apply for their federal EITC. Yeah. So is there marketing money
Well,
for
there's
this?
not marketing money
Maybe
in
there
there
should be.
because there absolutely should be. I think that if we pass this and generate a buzz around it, wake people up to the fact that they're leaving money on the table, that they could get direct benefit from the federal program, that hopefully we'll start to see an uptick in that. So if we push it for California, we're also pushing for the federal system.
So where do you go from here? I mean, it's early in the session.
It's very early in the session. The bill will be heard in the Revenue Tax Committee. In the Assembly. It'll eventually go to the Appropriations Committee.
Which is where bills go to die, as
Which
you know.
is where bills with big price tags go to die, unless we have a budget solution for it. And if we can make it a part of the budget, either with a revenue source or it's a general fund source, but there's an understanding that we know that it's going to be part of that conversation, then we can get it out, hopefully, we can get it out of appropriations. And even if it dies in appropriations, if we fold that conversation into the budget conversation, then we have a win.
Good luck. Good luck. His name is Mark Stone. He's a member of the California State Assembly. I'm Brad Pomerance in Sacramento. It's California Edition.